Hello and welcome to this new episode of the Values Workshop. I am privileged to have one of the country's foremost yoga teachers. She's also a doctor, and I've had the honor of knowing her closely for a little bit of time in my life. Welcome, ma'am, to the show. I have with me Mrs. Rajvi Mehta. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Just a correction. I am not a medical doctor. I am a biologist. So that's where I've got my doctorate.
Okay. So there are questions that are going to come that side also, hopefully, during the conversation.
Okay.
So as is the norm, I was thinking of what do I want to start with. So it is none of the two things that I mentioned about you. It's a personal reading of how I see you or I have seen you over a period of time. So there are two facets of you that I found very fascinating. One is that you're very practical, and the other is that there is also a sense of compassion in whatever you do, or at least I had that sense whenever I've seen you talk to anybody or teach them about yoga or anything at all. So in everyday discourse, we generally see these two as not reconciling so easily, because when people are practical, they tend to be uh, uh, almost emotionless very often. But you don't seem to have this. So is this cultivated or have you worked upon it? How does this work for you? Or are you even aware that you do this in this manner?
I would say I'm not aware that I do it in this manner. For that matter, when you said it, I'm thinking about it. Is that so? So, well, as you say so, yes. The thing is, the subject of yoga. So when we talk of, I have been a student of yoga for a very long period of time since my school days. And it's a very practical subject where philosophy is incorporated. So it's only natural that practicality comes in, because when you study things, you have no idea about the reality. Then you get educated, formal education. But when you see, you find that what I have studied and what real life is often different, and that's where people start getting segregated. So what I have studied through the practice of yoga is that you have to give a solution. So when you see, you have to give the effect. What route you give is not important. What path you take is unimportant, but certain effect. So say in a yoga class, if somebody comes in and I have a list of asanas that I'm going to do and I do it, but the person is unable to do it, then what should we do? And most of the cases, that's what happens, because every individual's body is different, age is different, condition is different. So that's where the practicality comes in, and it surely comes in something which is imbibed by looking at my guru, Yogacharya B.K. Iyengar. So we just grew up with it. So we saw that all the time. So we thought that's the way to do it. And second thing is, compassion. Because when you see suffering, it's only natural, and if somebody, so when people come to class, if people come ordering around, you behave, okay, you're not there. But when you see suffering and then you see people making an effort, then it's only natural as human beings you reciprocate. So I guess it just goes hand in hand, because unless you're compassionate, you won't be practical. I would say it goes hand in hand. Unless you're not compassionate, you will never be practical. You will just do things the way they are. But here you see that I don't have to do it as a job. It's my duty. So then you will see I need to do something so that what I intend to do happens in that person. If it's like a job, then I just have to tick mark. I have done 1, 2, 3, 4 things. What happens is not my concern. But for me, I believe it's my duty. So I will try my best to my best ability to see. And that, I think, naturally brings both together.
Wonderful. So on this line of thought itself, another question has just sprung up in my mind. How do you view, okay, I'll just bring an aspect. When we used to come to you and my wife was ailing, one of the things that I struggled very much, much before we met you also, was the sense of pity that a lot of people showed us. It actually made me angry. I had to work a lot to just accept that Indians are like that, and people walking on the street are going to stare and they will come, and they actually came and interfered. They said, no, you have to tell me what is wrong. And If they were afraid, I was okay, I could understand it, but they would actually interfere in our daily life. Much before we came to you, this kept happening. But over a period, I learned that it was their way of expressing their concern. It wasn't really, in a way, trying to interfere with what was happening with us. So, how do you view pity? I bring this in the context of what you said, because a lot of people don't say that compassion is practical. Most of the time, it is seen as a soft. It's something that is so soft that it makes you unambitious, or may not make you successful in the world. Or so, I want to know, because you have also been successful at whatever you picked up in whatever way you've chosen to be, of course.
Uh, well, first and foremost, I feel pity. It's to me, I mean, you feel it, but there's no need to express it, first and foremost, because the person who is having a problem already knows it. So, what's the point telling that person, oh, I feel so sorry for you? It's very superficial. What are you giving? And in fact, yeah, in my heart, I may feel bad. I may talk to my close people, I see this, and I do feel bad about it. But what's the point telling the person? They already know they're suffering. So by adding
Yes.
on, I think it's just superficial expression, or maybe it's just expressing sympathy. But I realize sympathy does no good. I mean, I need to be sympathetic rather than express sympathy, because expression makes no difference to the person. I mean, yeah, first time maybe. So I do believe that expression is a very superficial thing. I don't demote it or something, but personally, I feel that, oh, bichara, that it means nothing. Second thing is that when somebody comes in, as I have been trained as a scientist, I mean, my profession. So if you are a little more analytical, so I look at it very objectively. So then there is no sense of pity or thing, karma. That point, I don't look at it like that. So they have come, okay, this is a particular problem. Let me see with whatever knowledge I have of both the sciences, what can possibly work. So then when you become objective, you don't see the individual in that sympathetic manner, that pitiable manner. You see to look at the expressions of the person. You see to see where they're getting comfort, because it's a constant feedback. See,
Yeah.
certain things come so frequently so that you have a thing in mind. If somebody has a calf pain, you sort of have an idea what to do. Lower back pain, something, you have an idea. But when you come across these challenging, so it's a constant learning for us. So you're seeing them, so you are very objective. So there's no sense of such thoughts don't even occur. You're objectively assessing, seeing the expression, seeing the level of comfort, seeing the responses. So at that time, there's no need, or there's no thought of showing anything. It's an objective or subjective objective interaction. So objective thinking, subjective observation, again objective thinking, subjective, and it goes on. So there's a dialogue without words. So in that, there is no place of sympathy or pity or anything. And I think if I be just being, yes, compassion is very different. We need to be compassionate, but pitiable is not what it is. Because when that person is coming in with so much strength and hope, that it is an effort often. So when people come, it inspires us that somebody's taken so much effort, done that, and we cannot just bichara and leave it. Then what's the point? You might as well do it over phone. So I very strongly feel that yes, we have to try our best. Obviously, it's not that you succeed, but even if to me, what is success is if today is better than yesterday, that's enough. And over a
Yeah.
period of time, because we are going to have phases. Today is better, tomorrow is worse, and it goes up and down. But in the process, overall, if you feel that the person is more comfortable, happier, what else do we want? And maybe over a period of time, with God's and Guru's grace, if things improve, fine. If not, at least we've tried whatever is possible.
Yeah. This is interesting, because this brings me to two more aspects that I just realized that I had not noticed, was that even with my wife, while she was training with the exercises that were given to her, the asanas that she was doing, there was no sense of helplessness. There was always this sense of purpose, or if I may loosely use the word, dignity. So her fight actually we became better individuals. Now, because you were about to describe success, I thought success is living happily for whatever time we've been given. as much as we can. Obviously, there are challenges, but in that sense, it did change our mindset towards life itself. So we never approach things with saying whether it would happen or not. It was what is possible at this point of time. Let us just try and do this much. So yeah, thank you for that. I didn't realize that we were also doing this during the phase. We did realize it because there was this was sense of calm in the way we were approaching things instead of this is an asana that is easy today or not easy today, or today we have this problem or that problem. But it was always seen as problem solution rather than this is an unsolvable problem that we have for a long time, which we had. We had a clue of how difficult it would get, but it was never. We didn't carry it on our shoulders all the time. Another thing that comes to mind now. One of the things I was thinking when we decided that I was going to talk to you was uh, people who are successful. I have a feeling they are not successful by chance, however good, bad, or whatever sphere they are known for. But they are not ordinary individuals. They have a mind which is extraordinary most of the time, is what my understanding is. Even people who do wrong sometimes. I was watching Scam, so it was the Harshad Mehta story, and his confidence, even in a whatever a fictional take on his life, perhaps, is extraordinary. And I could not believe that somebody can go into each situation knowing that the things are so bad. And I happen to know a lot of other people. But in your case, I my question is, uh, how does one become so finished as a finished in the sense that there is this sense of purpose and confidence and the way you go about things uh, almost consistently, which mostly people who are waver when their emotions take them here and there, they don't give the same vibe. So in your sense, it was always this sense of purpose, and you knew what was going to happen in the class, and uh, everybody was on their aware alert mode, if I were to call it that, because you were so, and without being tense about it. So again, did you start like that? Did it change overnight, or how did that come to be?
To be honest, now that you mention all this, yeah, but honestly, I think, possibly yoga and my Guruji BK Sangar, and my parents have played a very big role in this. So, literally, see, when you start something very young, there is never a situation where there's a change in life. When you start older, you have something to compare with. Oh, I was like this and I became like this. This is what is just natural. So, I mean, now you mention, I would say, what is yoga all about? Being in the moment, being in the present. So, that's exactly what we have been taught. So, when we were taught, or we are being taught, so even today we are students. So, when Guruji would teach us, and that's gone on for decades, we are very fortunate to have had Guruji BK Sangha teaching for many decades. Literally, we've been part of the class. So, it was you were always there in the moment, do this, and you were doing it, and then you're observing and you're going. So, this is how we saw life as. So while practicing, if you're focusing on your big toe and say why your hand is going back, so you learn to extend your mind from the big toe, not shift it. Otherwise, your mind shifts from the big toe to the mind, and that is like a pendulum. So your emotions shift, the mind shifts, the consciousness shifts. But when you're practicing, if you extend the mind, so that's what we were taught in the asana class, but that was the training that was happening back in the background as an individual. So that's how life went on. So, okay, there is a condition. How do you handle it? You handle it, then you say, your mind goes. So you sort of learn to be. So that's what Guruji always said. Asanas actually help you to be in the state of neutrality. And that is yoga, being in a state of neutrality. There is no duality. There is samatvam, as the Gita would say. So what we are talking about is like while you're going, of course, we are not so stable. We are not yogis, we are practitioners. So there is a swing, but the effects are not that much. So you don't have these phases. You are sort of within a range between two standard deviations, you remain. And most of the time it is there. Of course, there would be phases, but you sort of in advertently learn to have these kind of a balanced state. Now that you mention it, I wouldn't say that I have had it, but you mention it. So I think a lot of this has come as a part of being a student. of yoga, and that is good fortune and Guruji. And that's where you just learn this. So it is just normal to us. So if we teach, I mean, the first thing is if you are teaching, it is taught that you have to be totally into it. There is no way if a teacher would give instructions and not look at the students. We've had it. Because how can you verbally do something when you cannot see that is being affected by the students? It is being imbibed by the students. So then you might as well put a tape recorder. Why should you be there in class? So automatically you develop those skills over the years. So maybe first time you're memorizing. So now everything comes spontaneously. So you learn that over a period of time. And I would say, like, for everything, Geeta ji, as you are aware, is Guruji's daughter. And I remember once I was to give a talk and I asked her before the talk, Geeta ji, how long should it be? So she says, whatever has to be said, you have to say it. I mean, what I meant was in a very practical sense, this is half an hour or something. She says, no, whatever it is has to be said. Don't come here and just tick mark. While in Marathi we'll say patila chuna lavla. So don't just come and say, I have done it. It should be whatever needs to be given has to be given. So that, I think, that it was their way of teaching us the sense of dharma, the sense of duty. And I guess it just grows on you. You don't do it all the time, but we hope that such phases are lesser. And as far as possible, obviously there are phases where one may become mechanical, as would say, give out, and there would be phases. So, but overall, I think these phases hopefully are lesser. And we do realize in our conscience that, yes, today it has been like this times, but most of the times, it's just natural to get involved. So that's why I always say teaching of yoga in Guruji's tradition, in the Iyengar method, there are no instructors because instruction is one-sided. You instruct what happens. So they're all teachers. You instruct, you observe, then the next instruction comes. So there's always unspoken dialogue. So although the student doesn't get much chance to speak, but there is an unspoken dialogue between the teacher and student all the time. And naturally, if there is a dialogue, you have to be alert. I mean, mind can't go to sleep and then you start. You can't have a dialogue in such cases. So that's how it works.
Can you go back to a time when you did not have this faculty? Maybe just to give us an example of where you were perhaps reprimanded or were inattentive as a kid in something, a story which kind of exemplifies what you're talking about?
Well, I don't think so because, like I said, I started yoga when I was very young. And yoga, in the sense, Guruji used to come to Mumbai every weekend. So my father had started when I was 6 or 7. So we grew up with stories about Guruji. You would go to Sunday class, come back and talk about Guruji. So I'd never met him, but you heard about him. And there was something different about it. It was something you look forward to. And then when we were a little older, me and my brother and sisters, we started attending the classes. So Sunday to Sunday, we went for those classes. So there was no idea because you're in the growing up phase. So there's no idea where you had any idea where you were like this or you weren't like this. It just happened. So yeah, sometimes people would say, we would have the class on Sunday and people would go to picnics. Now somebody asks, why did you go? So we have no answer why we went. I mean, possibly at that age and those times, if somebody said you had to go, your parents said you went. And then later, they didn't have to force or tell us. Something kept us going. Now, I have no answer what kept us going. Maybe something in our past or whatever it is. Something kept us going. Maybe although there would be body aches and pains. You couldn't laugh the next day because your abdominal muscles, and every week you were discovering new muscles. But that didn't deter. So I guess you just sort of, you didn't realize you were doing anything special or something special was happening to you, or whether it was the genes, I have no clue. But I would say over a period of time, when you see people in the same phase as you, friends or colleagues, and then you realize maybe it's the yoga. So for example, I would say I decided, I was very fascinated with the mountains. So I said, okay, I had no idea. And some people were going, so directly decided to go on a mountaineering course. Now, I was quite ignorant that these mountaineering courses are tough. They are run by the defense, the military, with their enormous discipline. And having grown up in Bombay, you have never seen that level of discipline, which is there in the services. And I was very skinny then, possibly I weighed about 35, 36 kilos. And I went there. And they had asked, running so much, swimming, but they didn't check. So I possibly didn't even try, and I landed up there. And then the first day, they made us do some exercises, on the ground, and I landed up sort of having a cut. There was some stone. Now I said, as it is, when I went, people were not very happy to see me because they wondered, you're going to go for a month, you're going to carry 20, 25 kgs on your back at some point of time, and uh, you're going to go to an altitude of 17,000. So, and somebody who has not trained, I mean, the only
Yeah.
thing I did was yoga. So I didn't complain because I said, look, you're already complaining, and having lived on the plains, you have no clue. Then later, I realized that we started with a batch of 60, but finally only 18 or 19 made it to the height gaining they took us. And I believe that it was all about the mind than the body. So that's where you realize, like, those who were definitely, most were, I would say 80% were more physically fitter than me in external appearance. They were sports people, etc. Of course, the mountain people were totally different. They have it in them, they're used to the altitudes. But I realized that it was all about the mind at a point. And that's where you realize the mental strength, possibly, I very strongly believe, came from yoga. So, I felt, yeah, it was good to complete it. And that also gave you a lot of sense of realizing how many things in life we take it for granted, which don't necessarily are, so many things which we feel are necessary are not really necessary. So I felt that it gives a lot of grounding, and maybe most children or teenagers should be exposed to this. Because,
Yeah.
Today with the standard of living improving, smaller families, parents want to give the best to their children, see that they have no difficulties in life. If the parents have had difficulties, they're extra careful. And I feel that if the children don't learn to fall, how will they learn to get up? So when they are young, if they fall, they'll get up. But when they get older, I mean, today, if somebody in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 70s falls, it's very difficult to get up. So if they have learned it, they know. So I think all this does help in, developing an individual. What they do.
Can you, there is one aspect, this also connects back to the first part of the question, which was about the practicality part of it. Although you have deferred this attribute coming to you from yoga, very often, very few friends, of late, all my friends are mostly meditators, and also we don't go into this emotional trauma bit of too many things. But the more I go outside my immediate circle and deal with people, I find these superficial experiences or exploration or talks uh, are very important to a lot of people if you make the right noises. And so, have you been ever looked down upon saying that you never show any emotion and you are not, like, within your friends or growing up with certain people? This is a random question, but it is just to say that as you're growing, you're also becoming a certain kind of person. And then, or were people around you always like that, stable and
No, even they were. I mean, obviously, everybody, even you would have your own ups and downs. It's not
yeah,
that you are also going to be stable. You will have your phases, but
yeah,
possibly the graph is not too much to show.
yeah,
And
true.
yes, there are people who may have, but it didn't really, I don't even realize it because it was unimportant. I mean, what does it really matter what people say? So possibly if they've said it, it's not registered. So most of the time, I mean, if you say your friends are those who have similar thinking or who sort of are with you. So it doesn't matter. They know you are like this, A is like this, B is like this, and you just sort of get along with it. So
Yeah.
I would say that even in science, for example, when you're really getting into your research, you have certain attributes. Only then you survive. Otherwise, you leave it. So when you are into science, there is a lot of discipline that comes in. There is that inquiring mind that comes in. The articulation comes in. So you just learn on the way to handle it. So
Okay.
possibly people around you know you as it is. So even if they comment, or if they would have commented, possibly I don't even remember about it, because just the expression and all, at some point I mean, everybody knows. Even a small, knows that this is just said, oh, how cute, and how cute. The way you say it expresses what you actually feel.
Yeah.
So you sort of read through it, and all these things didn't really matter.
Okay. How did you choose science, or was it by chance, or what happened in your academic this that convinced you that you wanted to walk that route?
Well, I wouldn't say I would have planned everything, because you do know that things planned don't essentially happen. So I possibly, I mean, it wasn't too far thinking or, planning, and so it didn't work. Yeah, it was like a very normal course. You did your 10th, you did your 12th, and I studied microbiology. I found it fascinating. I found the genetics fascinating. So I finished my master's. And then, yeah, there was this whole thing that I wanted to research and, sort of get into research, ask questions. And possibly during our master's days, we visited some ICMR institutes, and in those days they were compared to colleges, which had very limited. I mean, naturally, it was more an academic environment. You didn't have those infrastructure, so it was quite inspiring. So I just applied to two places, and one happened to be working with leprosy bacteria, which was closer to my field of study, and the other was working in the field of IVF, which was very new. It had just happened 2 months ago. So I opted for IVF, which was a challenge because I had studied only microbiology, which was working with unicellular organisms. And here you're working in a totally different field. Endocrinology, which all this was something which was totally alien to me. And the challenge was that I was working with somebody who was responsible for the first baby in the country and extremely busy. And they were not the internet days, so you could look up things. So, or ask questions. If you are starting off and you have somebody who's very, 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 very senior, naturally you can't ask stupid questions. So that was a good challenge in a way. So whatever she would say, Dr. Induja, with whom I worked, Dr. Anand Kumar, so whatever you heard, you picked up this work, went to the library, looked it up, and you started sort of understanding from scratch. So that's how I got involved deeper into science. And I found it very fascinating because there were so many things which were not having answers. There were a lot of questions. And that gave you the analytical thinking. And my PhD mentor was also extremely strict about way we spoke, way we wrote, which was very closer to yoga in that sense. So even if you made some, I remember writing something that we recruited so many, saying you didn't recruit them, you enrolled them. So, these small things started giving you a lot of clarity of thought of how you wrote. And that was possibly one of the tough trainings. So we had to write what project we were to do, and it was some 20 pages. You would possibly see the first paragraph and throw it away. It's not written correctly with some corrections, and you went again and you went again. So that gave a lot of patience, and then you realized later that, oh, how clear it should be. So that gives you, the way science should be. And possibly same time yoga was helping it. So I think both way helping you get that clarity, and here you are objectively seeing that you get clarity. So I presume that it both worked with each other. So the stresses, the perception of stress was much lesser, but at the same time, yoga brought you down. So you had an intellectual growth, you had an emotional growth, both phases. So that's how science came in, and then I did whatever was possible with science and continue to do so.
There are two questions that are coming to mind. One question I wanted to ask you, you said you couldn't ask stupid questions.
Yeah.
In a day and age where people get overawed by a lot of things very quickly, whatever little I've heard of Iyengar Guruji and his personality, even the photographs I've seen, there is a certain sense of no nonsense about him. So could you tell us a bit about how you went about learning and what was the procedure, how he taught? Also, because my kid is now a teenager in the last year of school, and whatever I see of other friends who have kids in school, and it's very A for apple almost. We are almost not breeding an environment of knowledge. It's more of memorization of some kind, or they are not free thinkers in the real sense, and they are not even being challenged unless they are being challenged on how can you crack these 3 chapters in a manner where you can reproduce it in the papers that you are giving. How were your learning days? A little bit about that, and
Yeah.
what did that you inculcated in your own style, having learned the way you did?
Yeah, what you say is very true that, academic education often has been, I believe it's changing now, but it
Yeah,
has
it is.
always been that it was possibly culturally, it was by rote learning and people sort of threw it out. And yeah, so it was more about memorization. It was more about just the 3 hours. And as now more and more people are coming out that that was possibly in the night, not the right education system. I mean, there was a time where scriptures, etc., were not even in the 70s and 80s for that matter, not really looked up to. There was this whole sense we still had the white skin syndrome, as I call it, where you take from the both. So I guess yes, that was there, but I guess at some point you get the freedom to think. So maybe sometimes in school, sometimes in college, sometimes afterwards. So sometimes you do get it. As far as yoga is concerned, yes, Guruji has been very, very strict. I mean, as far as class is concerned, he could not tolerate any nonsense. For him, the subject was sacred. The subject was divine. And if somebody took it casually, he couldn't tolerate it. That's for sure. He would tolerate anything, but a very casual approach. Sorry. So I would say when I started, like I said, I started, going to classes. I don't think I felt he must have looked at me for at least 4, 5, 6 years. Obviously, he was there. The class was not very big. There were 30 people or so, 30, 35 people. So obviously, he was seeing me, but never. So one point, then I went Sunday to Sunday. Obviously, there was not much involvement or anything. You just did it. Much later, I think after 8, 9, 10 years, we decided with a friend to go to Pune to study at the institute. And I must say that it was one to study, one was to be on your own, go to the institute and stay there. And that's where the seriousness came in. So we were doing Viprit Dandasana on the chair, and Guruji came and said, "What are you doing?" And he pushed. There was pain because there was, we always remained within confines of our limitations, or, this is our boundary. And then immediately, but we were very happy. What was the happiness? At least he's noticed us, that kind. And then you saw that as you got serious about it, possibly from within, you could see that he was teaching you much more, or you could receive much more. So as a guru, he was possibly seeing you, testing you, whatever you can inculcate or imbibe while he's just teaching the general class. And then he sort of seriousness would individually address you in the class or teach. So outside class, he was a totally different person in that sense. Very friendly, very compassionate, very considerate. Now, for example, if we went to Pune for something, to the institute, and I remember once I must have, by the time I started the magazine and gone there and reached around 5:36. Now he is the guru. And generally he would get a cup of coffee from home around 4 o'clock or 3:30. He immediately said, he called and said, "She has come, give her coffee." I'm a student. Those small things. No, you have come directly from Bombay. So that shows, I mean, he was what stature. So, all these small things that we saw, it sort of seeped into us. Small, small things that he did. I remember once my sister was here from US. She had small kids. They were very small. They were playing around in the hall, 3 years, 2 years or something, and then got cranky. And suddenly they were quiet. And then they had, a little small plate with some biscuits. Saying, "Oh, where did you get it?" Guruji brought it and gave it to them. So you see that the small, I mean, it was not that they are disturbing. They were, so we saw these. You learned so much from him, not essentially being in class or through the instructions, many, many such incidents. So, but as far as yoga is concerned, he was literally, he didn't do yoga. He was in yoga all the time. Whatever age, whatever he was, so there was no, see, normally when you know a person, initially, you may be awed by the person. You may be awed by the stories you have heard about the person. As you go closer, as you know the person, you start seeing the limitations, but you accept it because you have been inspired or you have respect. But as you know more, you see it. In this
Yeah.
case, the more you started knowing him, the more you realized that, there was something very powerful about him. Absolutely zero duality. Absolutely the simplicity. It's unimaginable the kind of simplicity he had, the kind of access he had to people. Because later, as you grow and you meet more people, you see that they are surrounded by a group of people. There is some group which is there. There is not much transparency. You don't see what's happening. In his case, the house was always open. When people traveled, his doors were open. He would, I had the opportunity to travel with him, not as much as some of the others, but yes, a lot within India, many times, and then China. And he wouldn't eat. Whatever they would give, say, come on, all of you, we eat together. So another example, now in China, when we went, he was 92. Okay, and he was literally treated, he was like a rock star. Believe me, there were crowds of people coming in, so we had to form a chain so that, we were worried that somebody should not push him. I mean, ages there, and
Yeah.
they were so enthusiastic. And in that phase, so after the class, he slept, and his grandson was staying with him. And then at night, we were 7, 8 of us, we were talking, and see that Guruji has gone to sleep. There, the intercom rings, and it's Guruji. So normally that hotel guy would get a glass of milk or something. So Kaushik said that I've told him not to send it because Guruji's gone to sleep. He doesn't want the milk. He rings the bell. Guruji goes and opens the door. Then he phones Kaushik. This man has come. Do you want it? And then he says, okay. He answers him and very politely, quietly. Now, somebody possibly it was me, I would have got irritated. I've gone to sleep. Why haven't you? I mean, these small incidents. So even once I remember there was a phone call at the institute asking for whether tomorrow was a holiday. Now it has been announced. There were notices. He quietly answers. People don't even know it is DBK Iyengar answering the phone call because he's sitting there. He picks it up. So that level of humility and simplicity also it appeared that he was very strong. Yes, he was no nonsense. Gitaji was no nonsense when it came to the subject. But otherwise, he was absolutely grounded. So then where was the question for any of his students? If we really call ourselves students, we try. And there was a warning he gave that everybody as they go on the path, you get certain attributes, you get certain qualities, which is the practice gives it to you. And then he would say that many people who go on this path have a fall. And he would say you have two avenues, bhoga and apavarga. If you unknowingly or intentionally select the path of bhoga, you get carried away by all the things that people tell you about you. You're on the path of bhoga. So yoga does give us. So you get certain things. So people say it, and it's very easy for us teachers. Now, if somebody has some knee pain and you cure it, and this person has gone to 5 different orthopedics, so I can feel, oh, what the orthopedic didn't teach, I taught. So I am greater. But the fact is, we are just messengers. We have picked it up from there and we are putting it here. We are couriers. So where's the question of the sense? Yeah, for a moment you feel good. Okay, that person feels that there is that little high, but it doesn't last long. So, it has to come down. So for us, whenever we met him, and like I said, we had the good fortune to be with him for nearly 30, 35 years. So even if there was a scope of us going in that direction, he would immediately be brought down. So that was, I think, a great good fortune because you went there and you realized, not that he had to tell us anything, but when you go there and you're in front of the sun, you realize, who are you? So automatically you get grounded. And that was the good fortune that he came here. And then Pune being so close, we went so frequently. So naturally.
Okay, one thing that I would want to ask you, I have done some yoga earlier in my life, and there are so many other ways of pursuing yoga that are available in the market. A lot of people have a lot of. To you, what is yoga? If you had to kind of define it and simplify it in a manner which is non-dual in that sense, yeah.
Yoga would be a complete total awareness of yourself. Your self means the body, because without the body we don't exist. And the total awareness which develops in you a sense of being in the present and neutrality. So a total complete sense of yourself. So then you are in yoga. So which is doesn't happen most of the time. You can't be totally aware, maybe in the asana, but maybe if little by little it spreads. So then you develop with this total sense of awareness, the ability to be in the present actually makes a big difference, because most of the time the past haunts us, past generates fear, and the future creates anxiety. So if we learn to live, and that's what would happen in class, because there is no chance, the way we are taught and the way this tradition works, you barely have a chance to sway. You are fully in the asana, what you're doing, or you're fully within the pranayama you're doing. Yes, there would be phases of wandering, but because you're fully there, you sort of develop certain attributes within you. So it's like being totally aware. So it's not about flexibility or what people see. Sometimes, people would sort of that this is physical. I mean, there's nothing like physical. How can the body and mind be separated? Can the body exist without the mind? Or can the mind is free? So when both are in unison, and that's where, so even if you are practicing meditation, the body comes into picture. Because if your body slouches, mind wanders. So where's the meditation? So when the mind, so as Guruji would define, dharana is a center of focus. And when that same focus spreads all across without dilution, dharana turns to dhyana. So that's all Ashtanga Yoga. But it all happens. So when you're doing an asana, so if you extend the hand, if I extend the hand, where is it? All the awareness is here. So you extend. Now you will see immediately the mind starts changing. So you extend. Yeah, I need to feel. Why do I feel only index? Why do I feel the little finger? And that's where the postural changes, mind gets absorbed. So it evolves. So you can do it, say, in Tadasana, Urdhvastasana. Now to get that state in a more complex condition, poses, say backward or forward. So as the poses get complex, you start realizing that you have to work a little more. So as I often say, people like the Yoga Sutra says, Stiram Sukham Asanam. Sthirata is stability. Sukhata is a sense of pleasure, joy, comfort. And asana, loosely translated as posture. Now, how do you translate it? Being in any comfortable position. So I am within the confines of my comfort. Or being comfortable in any position. That's all the difference. So that's why there was challenge, and that's what Guruji on side, because Guruji studied practical first. He started when he was 15 and 16. There was no philosophy taught. He never was taught sutras or yoga sutras, nothing. But through the practice, then as he got older, he started reading the texts, many texts, all the texts on yoga. And then he said, is what am I doing matching what the text says? So if the text says, so if I was an intellectual and I'm reading an armchair yogi, as one would say, you'll say Stiram Sukham Asam is being comfortable, being in any comfortable position. So if I'm comfortable here, I don't go beyond. But being comfortable in any position was a big lesson in life. So gradually you start breaking the boundaries. And that is the reason that this tradition went across, because people realized it was transforming them. It was their ability, their perceptions, the way they looked at life was transforming to such an extent, and nobody realized it. So, if you ask anybody, you will say, yes, there has been a transformation. When did it happen? The answer is very difficult, because it's so slow. It is happening. You can't pinpoint and say, I was at this crossroad and I took this decision. So, say, for example, if people eat non-vegetarian food, Guruji has never ever said, don't eat this or eat this. He's saying, what business? I grew up, when I was growing up, I didn't even have food. So who am I to say to be choosy about food? So he never advised anybody on food. But there were hundreds of practitioners who were born non-vegetarians, gave up. If you ask them, they said, well, not any specific reason. Somehow, we lost interest. We felt it was affecting our practice. We felt this. And that's how. So that is, this is one aspect, dietary aspect. There are so many aspects about us. The emotional, the anger, the thought. I mean, there are hundreds of attributes a human being has. And you see, they start getting transformed. This is obvious. And there's no specific reason they did it. Like people have a reason, religious reason, or they have decided because of some tapa or, some ailments, you decide I give up. There's nothing like that. It's just gradual. So Parsis, Americans, Europeans, anybody who have grown up like that. So that shows that there is some transformation occurring, which is taking you on a different course of life.